Hello, Factorio fans! By request, we're going to take a brief tour of my base using Bob's Mods. I hope you find some useful ideas, and please feel free to share your tips and ideas in the comments. There is plenty here that can be improved upon. Just so we're on the same page, I am using all of Bob's Mods here, as well as 3 others. The bulk rail loader, which allows trains to be loaded and unloaded rapidly, as we will see. Flow control, which I find has some useful tools for managing fluids, and far reach just for convenience. I'm assuming you're familiar with Bob's Mods and maybe have attempted at least a base or two. If you'd like more of a primer, check out my top 10 tips video. I also want to preface this by saying that I use a low pollution strategy, which I think may be less common. Everything that takes cards has green modules, which reduce pollution and energy consumption. The goal is to confine pollution to a relatively small area. If a nest falls within the pollution zone, I clear it out. This allows my defenses to be fairly basic, and it buys time with biter evolution and makes for a smaller base. This base does support 10 level 2 labs and 1 rocket silo, which I find is sufficient. But I know that many players opt for much larger bases. I think many of the principles here can easily be applied and scaled to a larger base if desired. We're going to cover 5 topics today: power grid and power production, the basic layout of the base, branching off the main bus to produce tech and cards, module production, and trains. One of the first things you've probably noticed is that I am a bit anal about my power grid. I have substations spaced evenly to take advantage of their 18 by 18 distribution. Because the substation itself is 2 by 2, this means that each substation is 16 spaces apart. I think it brings a nice clean look to the base and is efficient. Now, Bob's Mods does provide for substations with larger distribution areas, but I stick to level 1 substations for 2 reasons. First, I hate the mess of power poles that's required early in the game, so I want to get substations in place as soon as I research them. Redoing the grid when I get more advanced substations isn't worth it to me. Second, if you place a light near each substation, it's pretty much perfectly spaced to illuminate your entire base at night. So I like the grid created by level 1 substations. Setting up this grid, however, does require some planning early in the game. Once I get a temporary base up and running and some basic research underway, I scout out where I want to put my main base. I know that my design needs at least 12 substations across. You can see the substations as blue dots mixed in here, and at least 15 down. So it's got to be a fairly wide open space, preferably near water. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can see I've got some ore deposits in the way here, and I had to do some land filling. You can work around some obstacles, but the fewer, the better. Then I use belts to lay out my future substation grid. I create loops of 4 belts, which are placeholders for where my substations are eventually going to go. And then if I make a track of 16 belts and create another loop, I can be assured that my substations are exactly spaced correctly and in a perfect grid. You can know that you're doing this perfectly by looking at the number of belts remaining in your hand. As long as it's this is an even multiple of 20 belts, 16 across, 4 for the loop. So as long as I've got a multiple of 20 in my hand, I am good to go. For example, if I do this, I know that I'm 1 space too short here and need to move my grid over 1. Now I've got an even multiple of 20. Yes, this is tedious. Yes, it takes an investment of time and effort early in the game. But if you do it right, you can be assured that not only is your power grid going to be perfect, but you're building your base in a location with sufficient space for your 12 by 15 power grid. You can then get rid of these guys, and you've got your placeholders for your future substations. The low pollution strategy requires you to use solar panels and batteries until you get nuclear power up and running. You can just put those wherever there's space. Speaking of nuclear power, I advise you to get a plant up and running as soon as possible. You can go anywhere outside your main grid, put it somewhere close to uranium. The endgame satellite requires a component that uses plutonium-239, which is obtained when recycling spent uranium fuel cells. But you only have a 10% chance of getting a single plutonium-239 for every 5 used up uranium fuel cells recycled. There is an enrichment process, the bobbing about enrichment process, which can create more plutonium-239, but you need 40 plutonium-239 to get the process started. This is similar to the Kovarex enrichment process for uranium-235. So if we do the math on that one, you need 2,000 spent fuel cells before you can accumulate enough plutonium-239 to be self-sustaining. So I recommend running a lot of reactors, even if you don't need the power. The basic layout for my base uses a central bus system to transport raw materials, like many bases out there. I recommend using 15 belts. Copper, iron, and aluminum should have dedicated belts for themselves, but half a belt is sufficient for the rest. With 5 levels of belts, you can move a lot of stuff with one belt, and I have only found myself needing a level 3 red belt on this bus to support the entire base. You should also leave at least 6 spaces for various liquids and gases. Specifically, I find water, lithia water, chlorine, sulfur dioxide, hydrogen, and oxygen to be the most important. I should note that lubricant, carbon dioxide, pure water, and ferric chloride solution, I kind of sneak around the sides over here, but a case can certainly be made for putting them on the main bus as well. I leave room for a path down the middle of the entire length of the main bus. I am constantly moving up and down the base, and this is my most traveled path, and so I find the speed bonus worth it. Along the top of the base is all the smelting that feeds the bus. In generic Factorio, a case can be made for smelting near the ores, but in Bob's mods, it's just too complicated, particularly since several of the processes use chemicals. For these, I manufacture the chemicals just below where the smelters are. So for example, silicon plate requires calcium chloride, so I have the calcium chloride plants here. Calcium chloride in turn requires hydrogen chloride, with plants feeding that. Just below any of the chemical plants is a horizontal bus for chemicals and gases. Think of it as the vertical bus just turned on its side, although here I also include petroleum gas to be able to feed the plastic manufactories. I place roboports wherever there is space along the main bus. I find that level 2 roboports with extenders where needed suits my needs, but you can certainly put more advanced ones in if you desire. Along the main bus, I manufacture tech on the left and cards and modules on the right. Zooming out, you can get a sense of the T shape of the design with smelting along the top, chemicals, technology on one side, cards and modules on the other. Your refinery can really go anywhere. You can just put it next to water. Same goes for rocket components. Normally, in the ideal world, I would just be able to extend this main bus down and we would build more branches off to the sides, but I've got some ore patches that get in my way. So I've just squeezed in rocket production wherever there is space. For example, my fuel production facility is over here next to purple cards. My manufactory for the satellites is here. But all the way over on this side is where I do my radar manufacturing. At this point in the game, you can use logistics robots to move things wherever you need them. Branching off the main bus to produce things is fairly straightforward. I recommend not making any group of belts more than 6 wide. Here I'm using 5 wide. Because our inserters can reach back at most 3 spaces, this ensures that you'll always be able to reach what you need. I also recommend 2 spaces in between groups of buses to facilitate the use of tunnels. In general, I try to bring raw materials off of the bus up top, produce intermediate products, and then make the final production down below and to the side of the branch. So for example, for blue tech, here is my iron coming in. I add steel for the engines, and these feed the ultimate assemblers. But you can play around with it. For example, for red cards, I feed all of the items that are necessary for the card circuit board production, and then kind of loop back and finish off the cards. One hint, blue and purple circuit boards use exactly the same inputs. So you can just produce them all together here in one long branch. Modules are much more complex in Bob's Mods and require their own little manufacturing plant. I look to place this somewhere to the right of where I'm producing red cards because many of the components and inputs are the same. You can see I'm extending belts for copper and tin, solder and phenolic boards here, and down below, I'm leveraging basic electronic components and transistors. There are 8 levels of each type of module, so you can really power up your factory if you manufacture them all. Here, I'm only going to level 4. The recipes for modules all follow the same pattern. Each requires a specific circuit board, and each higher level module requires one of the previous levels. So you can see here I am manufacturing efficiency circuit boards, which are then feeding efficiency module 1 and onto efficiency module 2. Each circuit board will feed 2 levels of modules. In order to go past level 2, I then have to go manufacture a more sophisticated efficiency logic board and follow the same pattern to feed to level 4. Modules can also be combined, which is particularly powerful. Here I am combining efficiency modules and pollution cleaning modules to create green modules, which reduce both energy and pollution. As I mentioned, these are key to my low pollution strategy. As you probably already know, the technology for modules is not discovered in labs. There are specialized module labs which do the trick. Here I've been really quite lazy actually about automating the delivery of components to these. I usually just hand feed them until I get to level 4, and then I really never use them again. But if you're going for all 8 levels of tech, you'll want to improve and scale this design. Lastly, let's take a look at the train network. As I mentioned, you'll want to create a train terminal at your main base, ideally towards the top of the base, so that it's easy to belt in the ores to the various smelters. I like this concentric loop design. I think it's clean and it's easy to create. Simply create your initial loop, making sure that it is long enough to accommodate as many cars as you want in your train, and then come off a fixed number of spaces, usually 5 or 6 is what I do, and then complete the loop again. Repeat as needed. As I mentioned, I use the bulk rail loader mod, which enables rapid loading and unloading of ores. It basically dumps the ores on the top of the cars to load and dumps them out the bottom to unload, which I think is a little more realistic to how ores are really handled on trains. Of course, this speeds things up substantially at stations and also provides a huge storage, which is handy. With this mod and the braking force techs, I find I only need a single train to go a few places. Though, of course, if you have a larger base, you may need more. But I do believe that this basic design can be scaled easily for multiple trains and a signal network. There you have it, a complete and fairly well-organized design for a base with Bob's Mods. I hope this has sparked some ideas and inspiration, and as always, my thanks to Bob, whoever you are, for developing and maintaining such fantastic mods.